We are going to get started in just a moment. I'm going to give folks a few more seconds to join us here. Okay, I think we're ready to get started. We have a really packed schedule for today, so I want to make sure we give our time and due diligence to the folks who are here and the content that they're going to share. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Lindsay Estupiñan, and I am part of the HR engagement team. And my team brings you this month's behind the scenes with CTA's accessibility features. I'm really excited to dive into this discussion and help you all learn more about what is happening and how CTA system is just getting better and better and more accessible every year, it seems like. So before we jump into our panelists for today, just a few housekeeping notes. Please keep yourself muted until the end of this presentation. There will be a time to ask questions at the end, and we do encourage you to ask those questions. So go ahead and submit those in the chat for the time being. And then if you do want to unmute when the time comes, you can do that as well. But please keep yourself muted just because we want to avoid any audio interference. We also have subtitles turned on, so if you would like closed captioning services for this presentation, you can turn those on using the button at the bottom of your screen. Well, without further ado, we will go ahead and jump in. So first, I want to introduce our panelists for today, and I'm going to have them unmute themselves and just say who you are, what your title is, and what department you work for. How long have you been at CTA? So let's go ahead and start with Irma.
Hi everyone, my name is Irma Gomez. I'm the EDA Compliance Programs Manager here at CTA, and I've been at CTA for about 3.5 years.
Great, thank you, Irma. Erin?
Hi everyone, I'm Erin Fiorini, Director, Infrastructure Capital Program Oversight at CTA. I have been with CTA as 20 years as of next month.
Great, awesome. And let's see, Tony, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tony Capoletta. I'm the General Manager of Customer Information, which is part of the Communications Department. Our unit includes our graphics, signage and wayfinding, external electronic communications, publications, which includes our cartography and brochures and other printed materials, as well as reprographics, which does all of our copy center, print shop, and manages copiers throughout the fleet. But basically what we do is anything that customers engage with to learn how to use and interact with our services, to navigate them, to follow the path from door to door is what we do.
Thank you, Tony. And Graham?
I'm Graham Garfield. My current role is the General Manager of Communications and Operations Coordination for the Red Purple Modernization Project. It's a long title and I do a lot of things, but in the context of what we'll talk about today, I coordinate the signage and customer information for the Red Purple Modernization Capital Project, which CTA is wrapping up. We still have more work to do, but the major customer-facing improvements came online this summer. And in my previous role was what Tony does now. For 12 years, I was the General Manager of Customer Information, and Tony and I worked together in that context and continued to do so during my role on RPM. So you'll hear from both of us on some efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forgot to mention how long I've been here, just a little bit more than 17 years.
And I've been here a little over 25 years.
Thank you, Graham. Emily?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Drexler. I'm the Senior Manager for Customer Insights and Strategy in CTA's Planning and Innovation Department. And my team works on customer market research and some other projects that are relevant to the accessibility features on the system.
Great. Thank you, Emily. And Jeremy?
Hi, Jeremy Safran. I don't know if I'm spotlighted. I can't see myself, but Jeremy Safran, Senior Manager of Traffic Planning within the Planning and Innovation Department. My group works on bus stops and bus right-of-way and street design and construction coordination issues. And I've been here since December.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. And Alex.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex Rosender. I am a strategic rail planner in our strategy and innovation department. And I've been at CTA a little over a year.
All right, thank you. All right, thanks everybody. Like I said, we've got a really robust team today, so I want to jump right in because we have a lot to share. So I want to kind of level set this conversation. Before we get started and diving into this content, Irma, can you talk to us and just kind of help us establish what do we mean by things being accessible or accessibility when we're talking about CTA and our system? And are there any other keywords that we want to keep in mind as we have this conversation and move forward with this?
Yeah, so accessibility refers to the design of CTA services, facilities, and information systems so that they can be used by people with a range of abilities and disabilities. This includes both people with visible and invisible disabilities. So what I mean by that is also when I say visible disabilities is people who have physical limitations such as wheelchair users, someone who's blind, visually impaired, deaf or hard of hearing, or someone with a speech disability, while invisible disabilities are a lot harder for you to detect just by looking at the person. These can include someone with sensory, learning, or cognitive disabilities and chronic medical conditions such as epilepsy, cancer, heart disease, and many more. Other key words to take into consideration as we go through, sorry, there was a fly, as we go through today's presentation is 8A compliance. While this adheres to the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 that requires public transit systems to provide accessible services and facilities. The 8A sets minimum standards for things like physical station accessibility and vehicle accessibility. As CTA would discuss accessibility, that we aren't just looking for compliance for just compliance, but it's also important to think outside of the box when it comes to compliance. And that is, it's also about creating an inclusive transit system for all Chicagoans that travel with dignity and independence and safety. The other word that I want to dive into is wayfinding. And this entails a system of signs, maps, and audio cues and other information that help people navigate the transit system and understand service and information. And we have some great recent projects to help our wayfinding and on bus and rail. And everyone here will discuss these projects momentarily.
All right, thank you so much. So Irma, I'm gonna keep you keep focused on you for right now. So tell us, like over the last couple of years, several decades, in fact, we know that CTA has implemented a lot of things to make our system more accessible. So what are some of the kind of the standard features that we've had that people kind of know and can rely on our vehicles? And I've got some images to share here. We'll go ahead and start with some of the bus features.
Yeah, so some of our traditional features on bus include having that kneeling feature, also our ramps that can be automatically deployed or manually deployed. Priority seating areas, when the seats are lifted, it could expose the lower bus stop bringers for those who can't reach the pull stop, and a button to release the wheelchair securement hook for manual wheelchair users. Braille signs showcasing the bus number. We are also have the automatic voice announcements and LED text display, both making announcements on which stops are coming up. On newer buses, we have larger displays screens that show the upcoming 2 and 3 stops and external announcements when the bus is turning.
Did I lose you, Irma? I think I've got a couple more things to show.
If so, I could probably jump in and talk about some of these.
Okay, yeah, I want to give her one more moment. Irma, can you hear me? Okay, we'll see. We'll see if she's had some issues and is able to join us again. Yeah, Tony, feel free, jump in.
Yeah. So one of the things that our rail cars feature now, especially now that our old 2200 series cars have been retired, which had those blinker doors that swing in and were, two sets of narrow doors basically, is that we now have wider pocket doors. That began with our 2400 series in the 1970s because that kind of became standard. So that's pre-ADA, but that allows for people in mobility devices to enter and exit. And we have ramps that can be deployed on platforms for those who need a gap filler. We call them gap fillers. Near every wheelchair securement position in every car, which is kind of what you see on the right on the top there, is also a call button. So a person in a wheelchair who needs assistance can notify the train operator, say, hey, I'm going to get off at this stop and I need someone there with the ramp. So they can call the CSA or CSR in the station to come up and deploy that, or themselves be prepared to do it if that person is unavailable. Of course, we have enunciated stops using a clear and pre-recorded voice by someone by the name of Lee Crooks. Many of you probably know that. That play on the interior and exterior that name stops. Like it has PSAs, but most importantly, it names each stop, what's next, which side the doors are opening or and also identifies the train, which is really important at a place like Clark and Lake for, say, a blind user. Like my mother is legally blind, like she needs to know this is an orange line train to Midway and not a pink line train to 54th and Cermak if she's waiting on the interloop platform. We also have braille signage and raised lettering near each door so people can identify the rail car that they were in if they need to report something. And newer cars now have visual accompaniment to that audio, meaning the 5000 series and the 7000 series, which we've had since the first of those since I think 2008, they first started to be introduced to the system. So deaf or hard of hearing people also can know where they are and see a delay announcement. One of the things about that, though, is that that only works with pre-recorded announcements, and that's something that I hope we could improve in the future.
Great. All right, and then our next kind of like standard features.
Hello?
Real. Oh, can you hear
Oh,
me now?
Irma, you're back.
Sorry about that.
I just handled a slide for you, but you can continue.
Thank you. Yes. So for rail station, we have accessible fare gates, audio, braille, and also our fare equipment has audio and braille. We have ramps, elevators at 148 stations, I believe we're up to now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Tactile and platform edging to alert someone who's blind or visually impaired to not get too close to the edge. Braille signs on all throughout the stations, and the gap filler that helps someone to get on and off the train. While these are standard features, we continually talk and think with all of the departments here and also other departments what else we can provide at stations that can enhance the accessibility for riders that go beyond the standard that is required. It's important to note that when thinking about accessible features, some may be very specific to a population within the disability community because there's specific needs that are not yet covered for those needs. And there's no one size fits all for all accessibility. And that is a challenge that CTA faced, but it's also a fun and creative part of, cracking everyone's brain and thinking through how to solve these issues.
Talk a little bit about some of the training that our staff members, particularly our transit operations staff, go through to be able to advise people on what's available or to operate some of these things as well.
Yeah, so I conduct all of the frontline ADA awareness class trainings where we discuss the importance of public transportation for disabled riders. We also discuss the brief history of the ADA and how it came about, and how they can be allies to our customers with disabilities. We talk through disability etiquette and how to assist our customers with different disabilities. And we also cover SOPs and general CTA policies and their responsibilities while assisting our customers. Furthermore, besides my training, they also get hands-on training with TWD instructors and managers on the field, reinforcing these responsibilities and how to navigate the ramps, the gap fillers, the straps for wheelchair securement, and further etiquette based on our policies.
Mhm. Amazing. Thank you so much, Irma. Oh, Tony, yes.
One thing that I forgot to suggest that we add to this presentation when we were planning for it, that I'd like to add to that, and thank you, Irma, is that we have gone through a series of signage and wayfinding updates that are part of what I would consider station features, including especially in recent years, and you'll see this very well at the new Damon station as well as the new RPM stations, is to use really, really, really minimal text on signage and wayfinding, because a person with a cognitive disability may be overwhelmed by signs that say a lot. And CTA's history has been to kind of say everything everywhere all at once. And we're trying to get away from that. So now you'll see signs that just have a picture of, like, say, well, we have a patch that's a big gold out that makes it easy to find exits where we have the newer signage implemented. And then it might just say Sunnyside Avenue buses or something like that, and with a pictogram for people who have limited English. And that is like minimizing that cognitive load, minimizing the text load, and making it so you can read signage without breaking stride helps all users, especially those who have limited vision, because that text can be larger now that we're saying less and just what you need to know, just where you need to know it, as well as people with cognitive disabilities where consuming a lot of information really can be a challenge.
Mhm. Great. And I think that segues perfectly into the next thing that I'm going to tap you and Graham to talk about, which is some of the new features of our system. So I want you both to talk about what are some of those newer features that we've got that make our system more accessible for the general writing public and for our writers with disabilities. And then what of those things debuted with RPM, like Graham was talking about his big project area that will now be duplicated in the other stations, and what's considered when implementing these. So I'll go to our next slide. We can kind of see.
Graham, this is your show. I'm going to let you lead, even though I designed these screens.
So yeah, well, I'll start sort of talking about the genesis of these screens. So on the RPM project, we debuted a new set of digital screens in the stations to provide some improved customer information in real time. And before I go into the specifics of the screens, sort of zooming back, they came about through sort of a challenge, if you will, by the then head of the RPM project early on to me, asking if you could design an ideal customer information system in the station, what would you do? And the static signage in the stations was pretty well developed. Tony mentioned a lot of refinement and simplification that's been ongoing, and that's something that I worked on as GM, and Tony has continued and developed further and refined further, since he took over that role. And we continued some of that in the RPM stations, but broadly that was in fairly good shape. Where we still had a sizable deficit was in situations where service, or in the case of elevators, a part of our station infrastructure, changes in real time, and how we communicate that information to customers in both a timely manner and in a way that is easily seen and easily consumed. And that was an area that we still were kind of behind the times a bit. It's something that certainly I thought about a lot as GM. It's something that, Tony was part of my team before he took over my role, and he and I talked about a lot over the years. But one of the challenges CTA often has, and certainly accessibility features and customer information are not alone in this, is that, CTA staff often have great ideas. We have a lot of thoughts on how things can be better. And our ideas, though, often exceed our resources, particularly our financial resources. And so a lot of the digital real-time things that I had thought about and Tony had thought about and others, it was hard to get off the ground, without some resources to do it. And RPM kind of provided those resources to be a test bed for these efforts. So that's kind of how the genesis of these began in terms of how they were approached in their design and their sort of user experience. It really came down to the idea of what do customers need to know? When do they need to know it in their journey through the station environment? And what is the best, clearest way to communicate it?
Mhm.
Those were sort of the cornerstones. And certainly, those things are true for any of our riders, but they are in some ways even more critical to some of our customers that need accessibility features. Because if service is disrupted, that is difficult on all of our customers, but it can be especially burdensome if somebody has a mobility limitation. And so getting off a train and getting on a shuttle bus is an additional challenge.
Mhm.
Somebody has a cognitive issue, they may not process the change in their normal routine as easily, as another rider. And so being able to provide this information in a clear and timely fashion is important for all of our riders. But even the screens that deal with service issues versus elevator issues, I would argue, and I think many agree, that they are all in service of our customers, for which the accessibility features of our system are key. So that's sort of the philosophical background. So what actually are they? So there are 3 types of screens that we developed. They are a customer or service alert screen that provide both current, like as in it's happening right now, as well as future planned service alerts. So that's the screen on the right. The top half shows any currently, in progress system changes. And then the bottom half shows any upcoming alerts. And if there's more than one of either, it sort of rotates through them so that you can, see everything coming up. The middle screen is an elevator outages screen, and this takes the place of the dry erase board that is in all of our stations to list any elevators that are temporarily down. This screen is an improvement in several regards over the dry erase board. The most obvious is timeliness. These are updated in real time. Not right when the elevator goes down. They're not actually hooked directly into the elevator maintenance system, although that is a potential upgrade down the road. But they feed off of alerts that the control center already enters. And so those are, done, very soon after the, elevator outage is reported to control. So it's not quite real time, but it's very close to real time updates. But in addition to them, showing up sooner in that sense, it also requires less manual intervention. Obviously, the dry erase board requires the CSA or CSR, the station attendant, to call a hotline once an hour, write down the list of elevators that are currently down as of that hourly update, then walk over to the board, erase it, update it, what have you, to update the information. And, the problem with that, of course, is that it is only hourly. So if in maybe 5 minutes after the hour an elevator goes down, it's not going to be reflected on the board for another 55 minutes. And it requires the station to be staffed, which most of our stations are, but there are times due to various circumstances that occasionally a station goes unstaffed. And if that's the case, there's nobody there to update the dry erase board. So the elevator outages digital screen, is an improvement in several regards over sort of our analog current system. And then the third screen, which is on the left, is something new. The other two are basically upgrading and modernizing some existing analog system we already have. In the case of the service alerts, they're those paper alerts you see in the metal frames in the stations. But the screen on the left is a system status screen, and its only function is to tell you as you enter the station and are approaching the turnstiles, is service good right now? Or are there issues that I need to be aware of? And while that feels like a very basic piece of information and one that in theory is communicated maybe by the service alert screen, it would require you to stop and think, should I go look at this screen when I enter the station? And the reality is that that is not the behavior of our customers. And that's not a criticism. Our customers, especially our regulars, are a practiced group. They know their routine. They know how to use the station. The downside of that is that they, in the confidence they have in their use of the facilities, they don't often stop to think, should I check if something is different? Often in less than 10 seconds, they're through the front door, they've tapped their venture card and passed through the turnstiles without ever slowing down. And so you need something very visible and very concise at the exact point of circulation through the station, which means next to the turnstiles, in view from the front door to that lane, for it to tell them, is service normal or is there something I need to be aware of? And so, that's where these were very much centered on the rider user experience and giving the customers the information they need where they need it, rather than having them search for it. Because the reality is that they will not go search for it if it requires even a small amount of effort. And again, to be very clear, that sounds like a criticism, and it's not. It is simply an acknowledgement of typical user behavior. And if you want to build a successful customer information system, you have to meet the customer or the user where they are, not try to force them into a different behavior, because 99% of the time you will fail. So I've sort of given a lot of background on these screens, and I want to hand it over to Tony, who he and I worked together a lot on the graphics and the user experience, but he used his great expertise as well as that of his team. I want to acknowledge the other folks who work with him on refining it, and let me hand it over to Tony.
Yeah. I want to build on what you just said there and point out that, we do everything like kitchen sink level stuff that is beyond and above what other transit agencies tend to do when it comes to informing people. Let's actually go back 2 slides real quick. Even though we'll do cards on top of the turnstiles to tell people when something's wrong. We'll have alerts on screens to tell people when something's wrong. We have customer alerts posted in stations in advance of something being different because it's planned. We find that people just, they don't want to break stride. They tap their card and they go in and they don't look at any of the stuff. And we can say, hey, we told you about this, but they still complain that not enough was done. And more and more and more is not the solution to that, because we know that when we overwhelm people, they're even less likely to read stuff. The more text, the less likely they are to read it. The more things to look at in a different space, the less likely they are to stop and read all those things. So, this here, having that normal service on all L lines, which does show most of the time, believe it or not, is reassurance that we hope people really get accustomed to, and know with confidence that when they tap their card, they're going to go upstairs and get a train in a reasonable amount of time. And so when they transfer, will they as well, if they're transferring to another line. So next slide again. So this one here is where you don't see that normal service on all L lines. But note that because this is a red line station, we highlight red line as a thicker, more visible line to be like, your line's fine. Just know that these other things are happening. Same thing happens when there's something on the red line. That band is bigger because that's more relevant to the people at the station. And if it's something major, a giant golden band appears on top that says, stop, check alerts before you enter. which we don't have a photo of right now, but I think is a really nifty feature to make it really, really clear. Like, you need to pay attention. And I don't know that people are going to do that yet, but fingers crossed, they're gonna learn. Because this is still a lot of information, but it's detailed and it's immediate and it's better than what we've had before. So next slide, you see a version of that where this is a station where, as we sort of work out the new elevators and fine tune them, which is a normal thing when we open a new elevator, the elevator had gone down at this station. This was at Berwyn. And so you see a blue band there on the elevator screen that is similar to that gold one that I was talking about, that says, hey, step-free access may be limited or unavailable at this station. So, maybe there's another elevator at the station, at another entrance, or a ramp at another entrance. That's true at Bryn Mawr, that's true at Wilson. But we want to make sure that a person in a wheelchair doesn't just breeze through the turnstiles, or who requires step-free access in another way, breeze through the turnstiles, and then find themselves at an impasse, because you may need to change your path. And that's what this is all about. It's about empowering people with information to make informed decisions and have a better experience. So let's go to the next slide. And actually, I'm going to create a little chaos here. Let's go to the next one first, and then we'll go back to this one. I put these in the wrong order. So another accessibility thing that we've been doing is, and I see this as a feature for all riders, but also especially for people with limited mobility, is that at stations, we're adding stop letters, which you have probably noticed and maybe don't know why they're there or what they're for. But if you look at the neighborhood maps posted in each station, you'll notice there's a little section there, like the stops are noted on the map with letters already. And there's a bus connections diagram with letters already at pretty much every station on the system, except downtown where it's really chaotic and we have to figure that out. You can say, oh, I want the 65 grand toward Navy Pier. And from this little chart, you can find 65 grand east to Navy Pier, stop E. And when you will go outside of the station and you look around, and Grand Milwaukee and Halstead is really confusing, and you have no sense of direction, you don't have to walk around each of the 6 corners to figure out which one is the Grand bus to Navy Pier. You can just look for the letter E, and that will send you the right way. So that is a thing that also, because that's even more burdensome for people with limited mobility or limited eyesight who might not be able to read some of the finer text on the sign, I think that this really also qualifies as an accessibility feature for wayfinding. And a thing that we've introduced on our standard DMS screens, which means digital messaging sign, if you go back one, you'll see that we've gone to adding bus versions at the exits to our RPM stations. You also have this at the New Damon station. And it also tells you the stop letter right on the sign. So you can go, oh, I want the 147 Howard. I just need to look for stop E. That's everything you need to know as you walk out of the station. So I think this really, reduces some barriers to the challenges of navigability, especially when it comes to bus. And we've integrated that into our stations.
Very cool. Thank you guys. There's so much going on here, but it's so great. I mean, you're making things just easier on everybody, and like the color coding, right? Like we're all our brains are trained to recognize colors and bold and pops and things of that nature. So this is really just eye-catching, and it's really, really cool to hear about the progression and how we got here, and what are just even like the minute things, like at what point, like how many steps does somebody have to take to see this thing,
Yeah.
this their line of vision.
And due credit, a lot of these ideas also come from things that we've seen in other systems. We travel, we care about transit, we're interested in what others are doing, and we bring good ideas home and try to bring them to Chicago, because no one has a monopoly on good ideas. And we've learned that other cities like Boston and New York and LA are looking at what we're doing and borrowing our ideas just as much as we are. And so now we've kind of leapfrogged, I think, all of them here. So this is something I'm excited to talk about and then share with those cities and say, hey, let me show you what we did. I think this is really cool. You might like this too. And then this may lead to improvements that help New Yorkers or Washingtonians or Bostoners or Angelinos or Londoners. And so we have those connections in the industry, and we try to maintain them as well as we can, because we're all trying to solve the same problems. And that I think is a really wonderful kind of spirit to have. And I find that everyone at the other agencies is really happy to share and swap ideas like this too.
Super cool. You're all in it for everybody, all across the globe.
Yeah, when I see something in New York that I'm like, that is totally copied something that we did in Chicago, I'm honored, not offended by it. It is the sincerest form of flattery.
Indeed. All right. Well, thanks to both of you for giving us kind of the rundown on these screens. I want to shift over to the bus side a little bit, which perfect segue again. We already started talking about some of the bus signage. And Jeremy, can you talk to us a little bit about one of our other new features? These tactile bus stops, what are they and where are they? And how do they support our customers?
Sure, be happy to. I still can't see myself. Can folks see me? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is not per se related to RPM or any other initiative. This is kind of its own initiative. We were tasked by our low vision and blind stakeholders to create something that allowed them to differentiate between a bus stop pole and a CDOT curb regulation signage pole. So you have the same poles where our bus stop signs are mounted as the poles that are used by CDOT to tell you where to park and not park. So if you're blind and you walk out on the street and you need to find the bus stop, it's not often easy to figure out which is the correct pole to wait at. And for that reason, you might get passed up by the buses you're attempting to catch. So this blue sign attempts to solve that problem. That's not a problem that exists everywhere. Before I came here, I worked in New York City, and the bus stop poles are actually a different pole than the curb regulation signs. They use a circular bus stop pole and like a U channel or rectangular pole for the curb regulation signs. So you know that the fact that we use the same poles is not necessarily a disadvantage, but it does require this extra step to differentiate for our blind and low vision customers. So you know the design of these bus stop signs, these tactile bus stop signs, which include raised lettering and braille on them. Credit for that goes to people that were here before I got on board. Like I said, I started in December, so Jack, Victor, Quinn, others, if you're on the call, that credit goes to you for really getting this initiative off the ground. But since 2022, we've installed Heart from Victor. There you go. Since 2022, we've installed over 3,000 of these, and that hasn't quite covered the system. Folks may or may not know we have 10,000 plus bus stop signs and bus stops in our city and region. So we have ways to go from 3,000 plus to the additional 7,000 or so. We need to cover the entire system. We are going to try to get a new contractor on board to produce the additional 7,000 or so signs for us and cover the entire system so that no stop is difficult to figure out for a blind or low vision customer. In the middle, though, so on both sides of the slide here, you see the sign in its context on the pole and then a close-up of the sign. But the picture in the middle are this is tactile decals. So our blind and low vision stakeholders came to us with a request for additional information. So not just the very scalable bus stop sign that can be applied everywhere, but more information that includes route and direction that is not so scalable and is specific to a stop. So we're in the early stages of developing a prototype decal or sticker that can be applied to the bus stop sign and contain that additional information. And right now we're experimenting with materials. We have to also figure out how these handle the elements and vandalism, which could be potentially problematic, and where these would be most useful in an initial pilot rollout. So yeah, that's the latest with these things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I love that this is also aligns with what Tony said, right? It's kind of like the less is more approach. It's very clear, minimal information, but really just kind of that need to know this is exactly what you need and nothing more than that. So I love to see that consistency. Okay, I'm going to shift us a little bit over to Aaron to talk about ASAP. First of all, what is ASAP, the All Stations Accessibility Plan, and how do these updates align with that plan? And talk a little bit about the progress that's made that these things touch on.
Sure. So ASAP is the All Stations Accessibility program that CTA implemented back in 2018 with the official publication of the first draft of the plan. That plan was started by the strategic planning group and then carried forward with the infrastructure department to implement accessibility at all of the remaining rail stations and CTA's network that are not accessible today, as well as focusing on elevator replacements at existing stations, because a lot of our elevators definitely get beat up, whether it's from weather or from just continued use over time. But then there was a couple other unique features of the All Stations Accessibility Plan where they wanted to focus on forward looking ideas to be able to create newer types of accessibility features. And I'd like to say like the tactile signs was included as an early thing in that 2018 plan. And the newest is the video screens that Tony and Graham had talked about that our PM was able to roll out, and that's going to be able to continue to get rolled out across the rail stations, not only in stations that we're making accessible, but even ones that are already accessible. So the ASAP program is a dedicated effort for us to continue to find funding for us to make rail stations accessible. We do have a decent amount of money right now, but it's just not enough to complete it, and it's phased in 4 phases of the program. We look at the short-term needs of stations and the long-term needs of stations and how we can get to accessibility. You go back the one slide. All right. So, we're working to advance as much as we can on that. Our bus and rail fleet is 100% accessible today, but our rail stations themselves are not. But we do have 108 out of 146 rail stations accessible, so that's 74%. About a month and a half ago, before our PM opened up, and then the Damon station opened up the year before that, we were at 71% accessibility, so we grew 3%, which is a really great thing for CTA to be able to say. And I think it's helping our customers.
All right, great. So what are some of the complexities when we're talking about like these stations and the improvements, the retrofitting that needs to be done? What are some of the complexities that come into that? And in the meantime, as we're trying to figure out, the solutions to the big problems, what are some small things that we're doing in that interim to kind of make things better as we're on the way to making things even better?
Yeah, there's a lot of complexities to making stations accessible. We have like almost a whole chapter kind of dedicated to this in our All Station Accessibility Plan, which is posted on CTA's website. So if any of you are curious afterwards, there is a whole report that goes into methodology of how we got to the phasing. But to answer that question specifically, the different types of stations, elevated stations, subway stations, they all require different things that we have to look at. There's challenges with utility access, but then there's also some things that a lot of people don't think about that also might affect a station and how we can make it accessible. The CTA stations can be quite old, depending on where you're at in the city and which line you're on. There are a lot of historic stations that are out there, and we just can't go into those stations without doing our due diligence through what the federal government calls NEPA, which is National Environmental Protection Act. So we actually have to go in and do a full environmental and historical analysis of stations that meet the criteria for that, which could make it challenging for CTA to just go in and throw an elevator in a station. It's not always that simple. Subway stations are also more complex too, because you are going through street level, going through a lot of really old utility and tunneling down very far underneath the street. So there's a lot of enhanced costs that go with that type of station construction for that. There's utility coordination issues too that we come across as well that we have to work our way through. But all of that, kind of drives what makes it easier to get to certain stations versus other stations. So part of the criteria we actually looked at, how does that score stations in certain phases of the program? For things that have come out of this all station accessibility plan that we just tried to implement as we were doing some station work. And the one thing I'll highlight, it's not necessarily like an accessible feature, but I guess it could be seen as that. At Grand Station, when we did the Yearning Blue program, a few years ago, when we were focusing on the Grand Blue Line station, somebody had an idea of putting these stair tread nosings on the stairs at that station, which help with high-low res visibility to go up the stairs and down the stairs in that station. And we got a lot of really positive feedback from that. And because of that feedback, we actually incorporated that into CTA's design standards for our station so that it's just there for everyone, for the benefits, the general public at large, as well. And it's just a nice low cost feature too, I would say, that to add in.
Great. All right. And do you want to comment a little bit about kind of where we're at with some of the phases of the plan?
Yeah. So CTA has made some really great progress here. We have 100% of phase 1 that is funded. I won't go through and name all the stations, but you can see them on the screen here. So Racine and Austin are under construction to date. California is awaiting the award of the general construction contract. That should hopefully get awarded towards the end of this year. Montrose is still in design. State and Lake is with CDOT, but they are starting some advanced utility work at that location too. So eventually in 2026, you'll start to see some construction ramp up from them. And then RPM, those stations opened July 20th this year, which was really exciting to see those stations come online and be fully accessible for customers. Phase 2, it's 45% funded. Irving, Belmont, Pulaski, those are all in design right now. Same with Oak Park and Ridgeland. And then the rest of them just remain unfunded. We have gone through and done applications. So there is a federal, which we'll get into earlier, and I won't go into too far into that, a federal all stations accessibility discretionary program that CTA was awarded when that program was first released. And fun fact about that too, is that federal program actually came about because of CTA's all station accessibility plan. President Carter at the time and Senator Duckworth actually got together and figured out how to make that program possible. So really excited for CTA to be part of that history of creating that federal program.
Absolutely. Amazing. And I will say to our folks who have tuned in, I will include a link to the ASAP plan. I'll send out an email after the event so you can take a look at this. And they've got lots of great graphs and photos and just content. It's really impressive what is happening with this plan and the progress that's been made just since it was created back in 2018. All right. Do you want to mention anything on here or should we?
I don't think I need to dive too far into this, but for anyone that's interested, this just kind of gives you high level information of where things are. Some of these graphics are slightly out of date depending on where we're at with it because they were published in the revision that was released last July 2024. Some of the projects that show planning in the phase 2 are actually in design now. So that's nice to see those progress. So some of these might be stale when you see these in the ASAP report.
Great, excellent disclaimer. Okay, I want to jump over and talk a little bit about the research side of all of these programs and how we figure out what are the things that our customers want to do, what's going to help them navigate our system better. So I'm going to pivot to Emily and Irma and ask you both the question, how do we do the research to find out what features will best serve our riders? And then I'll have Irma talk a little bit about our ADA Advisory Committee.
Yeah, so the Planning and Innovation Department conducts market research with all of our riders through surveys and focus groups. And we conducted our first survey focused on customers with disabilities in recent history about 2 summers ago. And this image is just from an outreach for that survey. We reached out in a number of different ways, but this is just one of the social media posts to recruit people. And the goals of the survey were to better understand the experience for CTA customers with disabilities, including what are some of the biggest challenges, concerns, and barriers to riding that could help us identify what improvements we could make to increase ridership. We also recently held focus groups to dig in more about the different steps along the customer journey how customers navigate the system, and where CTA can make improvements that would make the biggest difference for this cohort of riders. And just a few quick findings from that survey. We learned that 68% of riders with disabilities indicated that meeting their accessibility needs makes it that their trip takes longer on transit. So that means maybe they would have to navigate to a station further away, one that has an elevator, for example. And we also learned that the most challenging part of folks' trip is accessing the CTA facility. So like getting to the bus stop or getting to the station and waiting, as well as on the ride. So like while they're on the bus or on the train. So there's much more that we learned through the survey and through the focus group research, but that's just a couple quick stats.
Great, thank you.
Furthermore, also we have an ADA advisory committee. The committee serves as an advisory role to the CTA. They help by providing input and recommendations on accessibility related planning decisions and bring forth their personal experience to help make change within the system. Actually, the tactile bus stop signs that Jeremy discussed earlier, that idea came originally from the committee years ago. So we continue to work with the committee and orgs that they represent to enhance the signs and make sure that they are helping the community that is meant to help. The committee essentially acts as a critical feedback loop in CTA's planning process, ensuring that the voices and needs of people with disabilities are incorporated from the earliest stages of planning through implementation and evaluation of transit improvements. We recently also asked the committee members what non-disabled riders can do to help disabled riders have a smooth and safe ride while on the transit system. And the answers from the committee members were very unique to their needs, but also simple things that anyone can do. And I'm not sure if we have enough time to play it.
Yeah, I think we'll skip it just for the sake of time, but I will also, that'll be included in the follow-up email with all of our attendees. So we do want you to see the faces of some of these folks who are on the committee. So we'll definitely be sending that as well. Thank you for that, Irma. And then one kind of last area I want to pivot to is funding for these projects. So I'm going to have Alex and Aaron jump in again as well. So these are big projects, right? These are big innovations that require a lot of money. ASAP obviously is huge. And then even like these screens and the tactile bus stops, these are all things that cost money, right? I think Graham or Tony, forgive me, one of you mentioned that these things require a lot of resources and money is usually the scarcest, right? So talk to us a little bit, Alex, about where the funding for these things comes from.
Yeah, sure. So I think for accessibility improvements and how CTA improves accessibility throughout our system, we rely on a few different funding sources. The main ones are kind of listed below. And so Section 5310, which is the Enhanced Mobility in Seniors with Disabilities program, is an FTA formula program that's really meant to fund capital and operations projects that improve mobility specifically for seniors and those with disabilities. And it really does that by removing barriers to transportation service and expanding those transportation options. And so this is actually one of CTA's main ways of funding more scalable, innovative projects that address accessibility, especially in ways that maybe the ADA doesn't necessarily legally require. And so in past years, this is a competitive, I should say it is a formula project. So in the Chicago region, these funds flow to the Regional Transportation Authority, the RTA, as the designated recipient. And then we compete in a competitive call for projects to secure those funds as a service board. And so in this, in past years call for projects, this is actually how we funded the Braille tactile bus signage that Jeremy mentioned earlier in the presentation, as well as recently we applied this year for money to install real-time digital station customer information signages at up to 8 of our rail stations. And this really builds off the work that Graham was talking about with the new digital screens coming to our RPM station. So we have those 3 separate screens that showed system status, elevator outages, service alerts. And so this was really an avenue we took to expand that set of signage to other screens throughout our system, but then to also include an audio functionality and an audio component, so that these signs would not only provide visual information, but also audible descriptions to ensure that those who are blind or maybe low vision or just have basic difficulties accessing visual information can kind of independently receive that same critical service information. And so I think this award that we received this year was a little over $1 million, which is really exciting because, like I said, this is our main kind of avenue for funding those more like scalable, more innovative projects, rather than, the big elevator investments that we usually fund through programs like ASAP, which I think is a good segue to have Aaron come and talk about some of the other programs that fund more of our large capital infrastructure projects.
So I'll take accessibility. I had touched on earlier, CTA that first round got 118 million for 3 stations, which was really huge for us. That plus the Rebuild Illinois program, that was funded from the state, actually kicked off ASAP and really got it going. So it was exciting to see that. And then the other funding source that CTA has applied to was this access to transit, and RTA oversees this program. It is federally based as well. But we applied for $1 million for the 79th Halsted bus turnaround, because if people don't know, or if you ride the system a lot, go to these bus turnarounds, a lot of them are not accessible today. So we've been trying to put forward a bus turnaround improvement program that not only looks at accessibility, but it also looks at safety and security upgrades for our operators as well, and not just the passenger portion. We want to make sure we do a fully incorporated project. So this funding source, because it was specifically for accessibility, we did focus on the $1 million that we did get to help fund the additional scope at this location for design of the accessibility elements and construction of the accessibility elements. So funding sources are kind of neat little puzzle pieces kind of put together every now and then, because some of them do very specific things and you can scope it that way with the project, and then have all the other ancillary, funding that supports it, whether it's formula or bonds or some other source that comes from state, RTA, wherever. And the rendering here is just showing you like what 79th Halsted looks like now, which is not really that great of shape, well past its state of good repair needs. And then the rendering on the right shows what it has the potential to look like.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I'm going to rapid fire ask this last question because we are just about to time. So the last question I have are, what's next? What's coming up? What's on our wish list of like big ideas or even small ideas that you all would love to see implemented, or maybe in progress of being introduced to our system? So I'm going to pivot to Tony and Irma and Emily, whoever wants to comment on this kind of in the last minute we've got.
One thing I'll chime in on is that one thing that we don't do well is audio in stations. I think we recognize that universally, and we need to do better in that area. So, one, we need a PA system that can do a better job of enunciating trains, and not just say an inbound train toward the loop will be arriving shortly, but actually identify what kind of train that is. So people, especially those with disabilities, who might wait in a special area or indoors or in a sheltered space, know what's coming and to move toward their stop. But also, like most systems, including New York and LA, digital signage tends not to have audio accompaniment. And now that we're introducing more eye-level digital signage, to be fair, we do have audio at every bus stop where you should be able to push a button and have it tell you what's coming there. But I want that on the train side, where at least like New York, it enunciates the next train and what it is in the next couple of minutes, without making the environment so chatty that it's overwhelming to people with cognitive disabilities, unpleasant for everyone else, and also confusing to blind riders. You don't want something talking when that train comes in and says, this is an Orange Line train to Midway, that makes it hard for a blind person to hear that. So we have to keep a very delicate balance of not too much going on for a variety of use cases, as well as making sure that CTA is a pleasant place to ride, which is obviously on the bottom of that list. Accessibility comes first. But also, one thing that I've been kind of thinking about, and have actually personally done a digital prototype of that functions with live data, that I'm hoping we can find a way to make work, would be, instead of having blind people come into a station and have to hunt for every of these new screens, maybe have like a single place audio station that's, wherever possible, consistently like on the booth, where you can press a button for status or alerts or elevator status or something else, and then also do that in multiple languages. Because one of the things that we find really, really challenging is that people who have limited English proficiency, even though they may be fine navigating the system under normal circumstances, even people who speak no English at all, research shows, does in fact, like most people who speak no English at all do have some limited English like vocabulary, in the same way that many of us can read a menu in a restaurant in a foreign language. Or understand a little bit of Spanish but may not be able to speak it, for example, through exposure, that when something goes wrong, they get in a jam if they don't speak English, because they can't communicate with the station staff, who tend not to be multilingual. And our alerts tend to be in English only, because the person in the control center entering them during something unexpected speaks only English. So, we're looking at electronic translation mechanisms to help with some of that. But it would also be nice in an emergency for a station agent to be like, oh, let me play what's happening for you in Polish. And have something enunciated in that way. And so that helps. That's sort of an intersectional audio device concept that I have, that I hope to develop a little bit further and be able to be talking about, which I don't think I've seen anywhere in the world. And so we could be trailblazers with that, so to speak, if we can make that work. But that's very tentative. This is just an idea for now. So don't expect that yet.
Awesome. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing on the screen, these kind of prototype devices?
Sure. So there's an example here from LA Metro, and then a mock-up of some of these screens. These are e-paper screens that we're going to be piloting around the bus system at about 18 locations through a program called Innovation Studio. And then we're going to have some similar devices outside of the new RPM stations. But these are like lightweight, these like Kindles that show bus arrival time. And there's this yellow button that you can see at the bottom that is a text-to-speech button. So folks who are visually impaired can push that button and we'll read off what's on the screen. So that's just a new accessibility feature that should get installed hopefully sometime this fall at a couple of different bus stops.
Very cool. All right, well, we are a few minutes past our time, and I want to say a huge, huge thank you to everybody on the panel, because this is so much information and so much that's been happening, and it's really exciting to get just even a taste of what you all have been working on, and to make our system more accessible for all of our riders across the board, but especially our riders who have a disability. So I just want to say thank you. Thanks to everybody who tuned in as well. Lots of stuff coming up this fall and winter as part of from the employee engagement team, but around the authority. Jamboree's coming up next weekend. Holiday stuff is going to be here before you know it. So I just want to put in a plug for everybody on the call. If you haven't yet, make sure you sign up for My CTA, where you can get information about all of the events and initiatives that are happening at CTA. You can sign up for various things. Make sure you download the app to get tuned in, plugged into what's going on. But again, huge, huge thank you to everybody for participating, for all of our speakers. Really excited to just see how this continues to evolve in the coming years and how we make our system even better. So thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your day.